here and then go through, and essentially is our PowerPoint, and then Mayor will speak and I'll have a few more comments. You're going to see some incredible results today. There are three critical elements, and that's our partnerships and engagement with the community, the communication we have with them, and their support for us to go out and enforce the law. Our elected officials who've provided us the resources we need, the training, the equipment, some of the technology to help us fight crime, and then of course I can't leave my officers out and their leadership. They've done an incredible job this year, keeping the momentum going, staying with their foot on the gas of law enforcement all year long, and you're going to see some of those results here today that we talk about. We can jump right into it, starting with our homicide rates for 2020 to 24. As you can see, last year we were at 35 murders, and that was an incredible reduction from what we had seen the years past, a high of 74 in 2020 and 2021. And this year we were down to 30 murders. So you can imagine how many fewer families had to experience the tragic loss of a loved one. And when I say that, each of those murders, it doesn't matter what the nature of it is, who the victim is, we handle them with equal importance, and they all take a tremendous amount of resources by our detectives, our patrol officers, and everyone involved in the investigation, to include our crime scene technicians and many other folks. Our clearance rates, 97% this year, and that's how many we were able to clear this year of murders. It took a lot of work to get there, a lot of hours, and again, we appreciate our elected officials, the mayor, city manager, for giving us the resources that we need to do that. Technology plays a tremendous role in ability to clear these cases, but also it takes a lot of time, and our resources allowed us to devote the time needed to get these cases cleared. This is interesting here. As you can see, as the homicide numbers decrease, our rate of solving them increases, and that's again a testament to having resources to put the time in that it takes to solve some of these murders. Oftentimes search warrants take weeks and months for returns, and things don't get solved in 24 hours like a television show, and I know you all know that, but it bears repeating because these cases are complex, and oftentimes we'll have hundreds of search warrants served on a very complex case in order to provide enough evidence for prosecution. And you should know our prosecution rate is also equal to the number of cases. We have not filed a case that has not been prosecuted in 2024. And that speaks to the tremendous relationship with our district attorney's office and their support of our agency and law enforcement in general in this county. Moving on to our shootings for 2024, 221 this year from 359 last year. But that's, when you look at it over the range of time from 2020, we had 732 shootings. And that was a really rough time for us. The shootings would come in faster than we could even begin to solve them. This year, it's unbelievable, but we've recovered 1,380 crime guns off the street, and that's one of the things that's attributed to this reduction in shooting incidents. And shooting incidents, you know, that's a shooting into a building, that's a shooting into a car, that's also shooting of a person. So it's not, you'll see on the next slide, gunshot wound victims is a different number. So we count anytime a car, a building is struck by gunfire or a person's shot at is considered a shooting. And so that reduction is incredible, from 732 in 2020 to 221 this year, and a huge reduction from last year. This is another astonishing to me that we have been able to accomplish this in Fresno. It should come as no surprise with the hard work that's gone into it, but we are down to 107 gunshot wound victims. Incredibly, 78% of those were solved. And I don't have the stats from other agencies, but I can't imagine that any other large city in California can compare to that rate of solving shootings in which there's a gunshot wound victim. In 2024, our aggravated assaults did decrease. They didn't decrease commensurate with the reduction in shootings. We did have more stabbings this year, and when you speak of aggravated assaults, you should know they include domestic violence where there's a threat of significant injury to the victim. A lot of family disturbances, neighbor disturbances, our unhoused community gets involved in these types of incidents, and it also includes our shootings. So this number is a larger one at 2,817, but we did see a reduction from last year and a huge reduction again from 2021. Moving through we are going to touch on rapes, which was a 16.6% reduction, and rapes, I will say, are often in this city associates. We see a lot of date rape, a lot of acquaintance situations, and when we do have what we consider a stranger rape, it's looked at quite seriously, and we put a lot of resources to identifying that. Thankfully, we have very few of those in the city of Fresno. Our robberies are down 1.6%. This is a challenge because robberies are pretty easy. Even they can be considered a robbery if someone's committing a petty theft at a store, and if they use force or fear to accomplish that theft, it's considered a robbery. So although we had a slight reduction, that will be one of our goals in 2025 to reduce further. We had great reductions in our commercial and residential burglaries this year. And moving on to some comparison data, I know that Mayor Dyer is going to want to speak to this specifically, but you can see the number of sworn officers from below 800 in 2020 when our violence was at its height to now 861 officers today when our violence is at a new low in the city of Fresno. And again, that is thanks to the support of the community, our elected officials, to include with 861 sworn positions. We're authorized for 926, and we are still actively recruiting. This is a hard job, not just anyone can do it, and we're looking for qualified people. And we take seriously every person that we pin this badge on, that they take this commitment seriously like the rest of us do, and really have the mission to protect this community. I'll touch on this again briefly, but you'll see the last slide. 1,398 community events that our personnel attend. People, some of them were large with hundreds of people. But in addition, this just goes to show it's not just a one-dimensional approach to violent crime. It's intervention and prevention with our youth. We have 34 officers assigned to schools for our student resource officers. We have a small community engagement team, but really this is a job for every single officer, and we involve our patrol officers as much as possible, getting them to go out, engage with the community, whether it's coffee with a cop or a car seat inspection or a large event like we had at Christmas time at Gaston Middle School with hundreds of families served with Christmas cheer. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the mayor, then I'll touch back with you at the end of this conference. Mayor, let's trade places with you.
Thank you, Chief Casto. You know, the message to the people who live in the city of Fresno or shop here or work here is very simple. And that is Fresno is a much safer place today than it was in 2021. And over the last 3 years, based on what you've seen on the graphs, you can see how violent crime has continually decreased in a number of categories, whether it be homicide, robbery, or rape or aggravated assaults. Those crimes continually go down in the city of Fresno, which is good news for the people who live here. We also recognize that there's a lot of work to be done in other crime categories, and we'll talk about those. When I left as the police chief in 2019, I felt very good about crime reductions in the city of Fresno. In fact, in many areas we had all-time low in crime numbers. Unfortunately, in 2020, a couple of things happened. One of them was COVID, and the other one was social unrest as a result of what occurred with the George Floyd murder. And with those two things, there was a dramatic increase in violent crime in cities across America, and Fresno was not immune to that. And what we also saw was an increased number of sworn vacancies in police departments. And again, Fresno was not immune to that. At that time, we had about 100 police officers that were off as a result of COVID or COVID exposure. We also had a significant number of long-term absences as a result of on-the-job injuries. And then we had police officers that had chosen to retire early, and we had a significant vacancy rate in the police department. So there were a number of things that changed as a result of that over the years that has allowed for us to have the continued success. But what I would like to state, and what those graphs did not show percentage-wise, is between 2021 and 2024, there was a 68% reduction in shootings in the city of Fresno. That's 174 fewer people or fewer shootings within our city, and that's significant. And also during that 3-year period, we saw a 60% reduction in murders or homicides. And what that equates to is 44 fewer families that had to bury a loved one as a result of a violent crime in this city. And that is something that we are very, very proud of. So why has violent crime gone down so much in the city of Fresno over the last 3 years? There's a number of reasons for that, but I'd like to state the obvious, and it is that cops count. Police matter. And when you add police officers to a department, you're going to see violent crime reduce in a particular case. And the truth is, in 2021, when people across America were demanding that police departments be defunded, this police department was being funded at record rates. And in fact, we added 88 police officers since my administration took office in 2021. And that is as a result of the support of this city council, who has stood behind the police department, as well as my administration. 88 police officers added over that period of time. Not just police officers, but dispatchers, as well as crime scene investigators and other support personnel in the police department that allow our police officers to do their job more efficiently. And when other departments across this nation were experiencing severe vacancy rates, and there was a police hiring crisis in America, this police department went the opposite direction. In fact, we were hiring police officers in record numbers and filling those vacancies. And the question is, how did that occur and why? Certainly it was as a result of the recruiting strategies that this police department put in place, but it's also because our city council and myself, along with the city manager, made the decision that we were going to make our police officers and dispatchers the highest paid in the entire Central Valley. And we awarded them with a 3-year contract. And as part of that contract, we added 2 additional 5% pay increase steps for people who stayed longer. And as a result of that, we started seeing recruiting pools, our candidate recruiting pools, increase dramatically. And some might say that that 3-year contract was expensive, and it certainly was. But I'd like to think it was a good investment. And that good investment is now paying off, because when you consider the cost of violent crime on a city, with hospital visits and funerals and people that are victimized, as well as the fear that you can have in a community as a result of violent crime, I would say that it was a good investment and not an expense. And I can tell you that once that contract was awarded, we began to see a dramatic increase in the number of people that applied to be police officers in Fresno, as well as a significant reduction in police officers who were leaving the police department. And as was pointed out by Chief Casto, although we still have more sworn vacancies than we would like, we are in a much better position today than we were 3 years ago or 4 years ago in being able to keep people safe, as well as responding timely to 911 calls. And as you can see, there is a direct correlation, as presented by the graphs, between the number of police officers hired and the amount of crime that occurs in a city. And crime reduction is something that is the #1 priority for this chief, as well as for me. And it's not just the police officers that you hire, it's also the crime fighting strategies that you put in place, as well as the leadership. And I'm proud to say we have strong leadership in the Fresno Police Department, all the way from the police chief down to the police sergeants. And in terms of technology, I'm very proud of what they've been able to do and how they have focused the use of technology. But I think the one thing that Chief Casto pointed out is their focus on clearance rates of shootings, clearance rates of homicides, because when you can solve a murder or you can solve a shooting quickly, you prevent retaliatory type gang shootings in your city. And again, talking about technology, the use of the license plate reader that has been very effective. In fact, it was instrumental in catching a carjacking suspect here recently that was committed in downtown Fresno. Or individual was apprehended very, very quickly as a result of that technology. Also, ShotSpotter, being able to detect gunshots in your city very quickly and very accurately. The use of video policing cameras, the crime view system that the police department has, and develop strategies timely, their ballistic analysis through NIBIN, as well as police helicopters. All of those tools are what allow this police department to be very effective, along with the hiring of officers. And I'm very, very proud of, as I said earlier, of the leadership within this police department. And although we still have much work to do in areas such as larceny and vehicle burglary and auto theft, those numbers are the ones that impact victims, ordinary victims daily in our city. I do know that the police department is going to be very focused on that in 2025, those types of crimes as well as quality of life issues. And I want to close by just saying that as the mayor of this city, and I can speak for the city council, I can speak for the city manager on this, crime is the #1 priority for us in city government. If people do not feel safe in the city, they're not going to go out and shop, they're not going to allow their kids to walk to and from school or a park, or to play in their front yard. And we have an obligation and responsibility as a local government to make sure that people feel safe in a community. And again, that is our #1 priority, and we will continue to commit to that. So in closing, job well done to the Fresno Police Department, to all the officers that are out there, as well as the community groups like Advance Peace, who has done what, in my opinion, a very good job in helping us reduce violent crime. And great work, and hope and pray that you'll keep up that great work in 2025.
So as the Mayor touched on, none of this happens by accident. It's a lot of hard work. It's weekly meetings, daily community resources to it, what's working, doing more of that, doing less of what's not working. He mentioned Advance Peace. They have their own tactics on how they intervene in violence, and they work parallel to the police department. We can't thank them enough for their efforts. Other community organizations that work in partnership with us, we can't say enough about that. Fresno is a wonderful place to be a law enforcement officer. Looking forward to 2025, we want to keep the momentum going, put the resources where it's most effective, continue those partnerships with the community and those organizations, as I mentioned. And one of the goals is to enhance that non-emergency response, as Mayor said. We'll shift some resources and implement some technology that'll help us move in that direction. Lastly, I don't want to end this without thanking my officers who on a day-to-day basis are out there in the rain, the sun, the heat, the cold, day, night, being called away from their families for a homicide, being disrupted for a SWAT call from a family event, and they do it, with the intent of making sure the city is a safer place. They do it with I'm trying to think of the right word, but they do it because they want to and because they care. It's not because they have to. There are other jobs that any of them could have taken that wouldn't take such dedication, but they do it. The detectives that spend hours and hours of tedious work looking at call detail records, all of that goes into these crime reductions. And I have to say as well, our communication, not only internally amongst our own special units, has never been better. I've heard that from a number of my leadership members, commanders, of lieutenants, captains in this department, and it's also never been better with our allied agencies, to include the Sheriff's Department, the CHP, and our federal partners. I can't thank our MAGIC and our street violence teams enough for the investigative efforts that led to these reductions, but also our patrol officers out there handling between 8,000 and 9,000 calls for service a week. And that's a lot of calls for service no matter how you slice it. And that includes their proactive work of going out there and making efforts to keep these crimes from ever even happening. So with that, any questions, I'll be glad to take them. And if you have one for Mayor, I'll step aside for him.
What were the lessons learned in 2024 that were
That violent crime is extremely important. As Mayor said, people can't operate freely and have a secure environment if they're afraid of violent crime. But we also realize that just those quality of life issues, the homelessness crisis, the property crimes, we need to work on a better response to those. Although violent crime is critical because we're talking about lives saved, those other types of crimes although they're not as high a priority for a quick response, they're just as important to the many people living and working in this city in a different way.
You guys mentioned Advanced Peace, and it's kind of had a little bit of a history with that organization.
Mm-hmm.
The impact that they've had on really helping you reduce these violent crimes. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. I look at them as on a parallel track. Their mission is to decrease violence in Fresno, but they do it in a completely different way. We don't share information with them. They don't work for us or anything like that. But it's their job to figure out what are some conflicts, and they can intervene in those conflicts in a way that the police cannot. We have our role in impacting violent crime, and they have theirs. And I think they're just synergistic. They aren't the same, but we have the same goal.
Is that kind of one of the successful formulas that you guys have found?
Yes.
Community engagement
Yeah.
and helping?
Yes. Community engagement without enforcement doesn't work, and enforcement without community engagement doesn't work. So it takes a balance, like everything in this department, of both. How do we get the right balance of community engagement? We can't spend all of our time doing that. We have to enforce the law, but we also know that if we don't intervene with youth and make those relationships with them, particularly in our middle schools and high schools, then we're losing out on opportunities to help people have a relationship with the police later in life when they might need help and we want them to call us. Yeah, it's so they're 90.
2024, or is that count 2023?
Yeah. Yes, the calculation is we've solved, I think it's either 28 or 29. I can't do the percentages in my head like the mayor, but we've solved almost 30 murders this year. We had 30 murders, but they could be from a previous year. So that when you look over a period of time, you can see it's easier to compare. That's the way the UCR calculates it.
So we've had 30 this year. But
Yeah.
all 30
Not all 30 have.
One of those have been solved.
Yeah, no, it's probably more in the 50s or 60s for just this year, but with prior murders from prior years being solved, it equates to 97%. And that's consistent among most of the agencies that we compare ourselves to, including Sacramento, Long Beach, and Oakland, all of which had more homicides than Fresno this year.
And where are you guys at in Fresno next?
Well, I'll let Mayor answer that one. Perhaps city manager.
Yeah, I'll touch on it. Briefly, as you know, we took some time in hiring a search firm. We had a number of search firms that had replied to the request for proposal. City manager made the decision on which search firm to hire. That search firm has been in place now for the past few months. They did some community surveys, both community forums as well as online, and looking at what were the assets that someone would want to see in their next police chief here in Fresno. We also, the city manager and I, conducted a number of individual interviews with leaders in the community, again, to touch on or to gain information of what did they want to see in their next police chief. All of that was put together for the recruiters so that they, as they went out and did the search, they would know what to look for. And from the rest of that, I'm going to let the city manager speak to.
So I believe we have, the search firm has gathered a first cut of candidates, and the mayor and I and our team are going to be having a briefing with the recruiter. I don't know how many. I don't know how many were internal versus external. I just know that we're going to be meeting, I believe, later this week to have a conversation with the search firm about the responses to our recruitment.
Do you guys have even a rough timeline on how long it's going to take?
Well, the timeline is going to be we'll be meeting with the recruiter this month to find out who those candidates are, and then based on that, we'll set up a process. That process will involve the community in some form or fashion, as well as the city manager, myself, and then based on that, we will hopefully be able to make a hiring decision in March.
And these candidates are obviously from across the country as well as you don't know.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It was a national search. Certainly, we're going to have internal candidates. At least that's our hope. All of competent, qualified candidates from across the nation. So it will be difficult until we see who actually applied, and then based on that, we'll go through the process and hopefully sometime in March, maybe late March, we'll be able to identify the next police chief. Okay? Alrighty. Thank you, everyone.